Hey everyone, welcome to our weekly Mussar gathering. This week will be our second week exploring the soul trait of truth. But first we will begin, as we always do, with a short meditation. So please relax and get comfortable in your seat. And close your eyes. And take in a deep breath through the nose and hold. And exhale through the mouth and hold. And again, inhale through the nose and hold. And exhale through the mouth and hold. As you go at your own pace of inhaling through the nose and holding, and exhaling through the mouth and holding, if thoughts should come into your head, just observe them and let them go, like watching a car move past on the road. Now is not the time for solving problems. Right now, all you need to do is inhale through the nose and hold, and exhale through the mouth and hold. And on your next inhale, say to yourself, Shema. And on the exhale, listen. Shema. Listen. In Shema, we're listening deeply, without judgment, without offering advice. In Shema, we are listening with an open heart. Shema. Listen. And when you're ready, you may open your eyes. Hey, welcome, Joanne. Nice to see you. Oops, I see we have another kitty visiting with Turtle.
Yes, she only comes to visit when I'm on a Zoom call.
They are so funny. Okay, so as I hinted in my email, or was pretty explicit about in my email, I want to sort of talk about this idea of taking a baby step. Is for one of us to take a baby step, is that kind of a big deal or a small deal? Or some of each? What do you think? Yeah, Joanne.
I think it could be a big deal depending on what soul trait, and also how, like maybe off the scale they are, in that the opposite direction or in one direction or the other, far from the middle.
Yeah, thank you. So it depends from Joanne, and depending on what soul trait and what we're working on, how to balance. Absolutely. As Carrie or Paul?
I think small steps are really important. You crawl before you learn how to walk, and you also build a good habit. If you're working on a good creating a good habit with a soul trait, it's much easier to start with little steps, and then it just builds on one another, and eventually it becomes automatic. So some people could just leap and do it all at once, like immediately. Most of us can't do that. So that's why I think, for me anyway, small steps are really helpful and important for change.
Thanks, Carrie. Other thoughts about baby steps? Yeah, Sarah.
I think that for me, it starts with awareness. Because like at first when you said baby steps, I wasn't even sure what you were talking about, but then I caught on. And but like if you're aware that you're very direct, as I am, sometimes it's, so I'm aware of that now, and I realize that for some people it is not an attractive quality, or sometimes it can be too much. So it's like too much honesty or too much of whatever. And so I think that if you're aware that you're too truthful or you're dishonest, awareness is important to know, like where you are on the continuum, because I think it's a continuum, like all of them. So that's my thought.
Yeah, thank you. And I would say, for purposes of this discussion, we could also expand outside the realm of like Mussar work per se. And, a lot of the people that I work with who in the grief counseling, they're kind of having to relearn a bunch of things. They've been married, their partners died, and they, are re-entering the world. And sometimes it's, well, I'm taking baby steps, I'm doing little things. And sometimes it kind of comes with almost a like a self-negating quality. It's like, well, all I can do is like this baby step towards being more social. And so, it got me thinking, well, is the baby step a small, tiny little step, or is it a big step? And we're starting to kind of uncover that. Paul, is this a new hand raise? All right.
Yeah, so I'm first of all, I'm reminded of the role that Bill Murray had when he was seeing the therapist, and the therapist was talking about baby steps. Anyway, if you'd seen the movie, I can't remember the name of it now. What was it? Remember? Oh, okay. Anyway, had Richard Dreyfuss was the therapist. It was if you like Bill Murray, you'd love it. Anyway, but baby steps was a big thing for him.
I'll look it up.
And in other areas, I'm a huge fan when I'm working with people at work, or in any situation where I'm trying to plan something with people, of what Carrie was talking about before, sort of the crawl, walk, run model, just so that people understand that at first we're going to be doing like just some basic parts of whatever we're trying to build. We know we have an aspiration that's out there, but the first start is going to be baby steps. We're going to be doing small things, and just to set expectations is important. What About Bob was the name of the movie. So anyway,
What About Bob? There we go. Okay.
So thank you. So I think that in that way, it depends on your perspective, whether it's a small step or a big step. I think sometimes it's a big step just to lay out that baby steps are important to be starting with concept, and the baby steps are okay. They are just, especially when you're making changes in behaviors or changes in a business process, either way, new behaviors, new patterns, new habits. So you can't just do it all at once. At least I can't. I know that. So thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Other thoughts, comments on this basic idea, or what other people have said? Yeah, Sarah, and then Joanne. And Phyllis, did you have your hand up?
Just a quick comment. Get along with what you were saying, Greg, how to apply it, not just to Mussar traits. It's good to know yourself. So some people are very more passive and kind and not assertive and don't speak up. And then there's others that are very direct and whatever. And so it's like nice to find a middle ground so that, so if I mean, if you're interested, everybody has to be interested in self-improvement, which they aren't. But if people want to better themselves, a very quiet person might want to try to, get out there more, and a more vocal person might want to listen better. So
Right.
anyway, so thanks.
Thank you. Joanne?
Yeah, well, I guess I've been both the quiet person and the person who needs to listen better. Like in my board meetings as a sisterhood president, I had to learn how to listen better. And then I don't remember which trait this was, but we had to like go and greet people on the street, like 3 people a day or something like that, which was really unusual for me. And now I'm like much more open to it. But at first it was like really weird, and I didn't know how people would react. And, I got positive reaction from most people, and some people just didn't react at all. But I think now, it's like I guess I'm more likely to look at someone on the street, and also something we were talking about the last trade. Now I don't remember, but if somebody's asking me for a handout, to look at them, so things that were not, I wasn't intending to do. It takes practice, but once you start doing them, and then it becomes easier and more part of you. That's all.
Yeah, thank you, Joanne. And I think you're describing, I think those were honor practices, to greet other people, and inspired by a saying in the Talmud about one rabbi who would always greet other people in the market before they greeted him, So I think people have made good points. And Janos, were you gonna, it looked like you're unmuted. Did you want to comment?
No, actually, I'm good. I'm listening.
Oh, okay. Very good. Very good. One thing I noticed is when people would say it, it was often like with this real feeling of impatience, like I should be able to do X. What's the big deal? I should be able to just call someone and go out for coffee, or I should be able to, make plane reservations and go travel, even though I hadn't been on a plane in 8 years. Somehow there's this feeling. It's like, so I'm taking baby steps, and that really got me thinking. And I was thinking about, like, for those of you who have kids, or you may have seen this kind of image on the TV when the baby's taking their first steps, they take 3 steps and then kind of fall into the arms of their parent with this huge grin on their face. And, for that baby, from the baby's perspective, they put everything they had into taking those 3 steps. Like for, when we're older and we're a jogger, or we've, just are used to walking to the store or whatever, of course we can do much more, but we all started at that stage where it took everything we did. So we're back at that place where we're up against some kind of barrier and we're needing to learn something new. Like those baby steps are huge, because it might take everything we have to kind of make that phone call. Or even with Joanne's example, we lean into some of that discomfort as part of our Mussar practice. It's like, okay, I'm going to greet 3 people on the street. I was in New York in the 70s. You could get shivved for doing that. So you don't, are you sure you want to go down that road? But we lean into that because it helps us learn and it helps us grow, and it does become automatic. So I want to welcome Harry. Thank you for joining us today.
Good to be here.
Yeah. Any other comments on this idea before we move on? Yeah, Carrie and then Toby.
It still really doesn't have anything to do with what we're the main topic, but you just mentioned New York streets in the 70s, and I lived there in the 70s, and I was walking down the street. I was a student, And this person stopped me. He said, smile. It can't be that bad. And it made me think. It really made a difference. And how I thought about walking from then on. So that's
Well,
all.
good, and I'm glad you didn't get shivved. Toby,
I think determining whether a baby step is a big deal or a small deal, if you are, I suffer from anxiety disorder. And for those of us who are anxious for any reason, even, even temporarily, sometimes making the smallest effort is a huge deal, because normally you wouldn't do it at all.
mhm,
And a therapist friend of mine said it's like an exposure experiment,
mm,
where you're forcefully exposing yourself to a thing that you would never do, but you do it very slowly, because if you do it slowly, you can acclimatize yourself so that it is not a big deal the next time you do it.
yeah, great, thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you for sharing that, Toby. And I think where this sort of applies to truth is we see someone do something which is maybe easy for us.
Mhm.
Is it an easy thing that they did?
Maybe not.
Maybe not. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. We don't know. We don't know what the truth is for them of whatever it was that they did. And it's easy for us to kind of say, oh, well, that was easy for me, so it must have been easy for them. Or what's the big deal? Sometimes people who are very successful, either as athletes or as, in a business environment, then they get put into a management position, and it's been so easy for them, they don't know how to teach other people how to do it, because they've never had to struggle in that particular arena. And so, and I've certainly fallen into that situation as well. Yes, Paul.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I was the CEO of the company that I recently, like 6 months ago, started working for, posted something on LinkedIn that I know was well-meaning, but I don't think he's a mean person, but he was talking about, I know people talk about imposter syndrome, and I know when I went to school, I was surrounded by people that came from preppy schools, blah blah blah, and I felt out of place, but I just determined I was going to grit my way through it, and I was going to be, and here I am. And I thought, I know you're trying to say the right thing, like it's okay to feel like an imposter, but for people who like Toby was saying, having anxiety issues or disorders, is you can't just push yourself through it. It's just something you have to figure out how to get around, or you have to go to therapy or something like that. I mean, it just depends on the situation. But I just thought it was really, tone deaf.
Yeah.
And I shake my head.
You didn't respond.
Yeah, that reminds me of my wife would tell these stories. She did a lot of sort of women in careers, and they would bring in someone who was a very successful vice president, and she would tell her story about how she sort of got to where she was. But it was like, okay, but what am I supposed to do? It's like, great, you had all of this, you had the money for the nanny, or you had whatever, but where do I go? That was the truth of your life, but what's the truth of my life? Yeah, Linda or Frank?
Yeah, yes, I agree that we are really very unique people, and I think it's dangerous for us to make presumptions for the other. And I'm sure that often that gets us into trouble. And so this discussion is important.
Thank you. Well, that's a good segue, I think, to the first text that I wanted to share. Okay, let's see. This is not working. There we go. So may I have a volunteer to read this first bullet?
Truth is the sole trait of inclusive, respectful regard, both for what is apparent and what remains undetected, for both what is obvious as well as that which may elude us or be hidden from us.
Great, thank you. Okay, I'm going to share that in the chat now. So that's from Rabbi Carol Glass from the Mussar Torah commentary. So what is Rabbi Glass, like what is her main point here? And there it is in the chat. How does she, what element of truth is she highlighting here?
I guess what's not so apparent, or what you might not know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so what's the implication of that? Things that are not being apparent. Yeah, Carrie.
That we have to be aware of what we don't know. In other words, we be reminded that we have biases, we have preconceptions. I mean, we sometimes think we know what the person's saying or thinking or feeling or whatever, but in this case, if we honor the truth of yourself and the person or persons, you'll know that you're not seeing the whole picture.
Mm.
You need to be on the lookout for what you're not seeing, or ask for what you're not seeing, and not just assume that everything that in front of you is all that there is. If that makes any sense.
That's to me. What do other people think? Yes, Karen.
It seems to me that if different people have different opinions of the same situation, then we have more than one truth. And therefore, truth, if it's inclusive, includes our truth and what other people believe to be the truth.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. That is one of the most perplexing and important, powerful parts about truth. I think it's so easy for us to like, oh, truth is black and white. You know, it's either true or it's not true, but two people may disagree and have reasons why they think things are a certain way. And they both can have a claim on what is true. Toby.
What you see isn't always what you get.
Mm.
You know, the people, especially if you're meeting somebody for the first time, or if you don't know them well, they may not, you know, share their entire life story with you the first time around. You may not know things about their past or things that are troubling them or what might be going on in their life. And that truth is made up of many parts, I guess, and what you see or what someone presents to you may not be the entire truth or their entire truth.
You, Toby. Is it may not be their entire truth or is not their entire truth?
Well, I mean, there are some people who have a great delight in oversharing, you know,
True.
so
Good point.
probably they're not.
Yes. Yanis, I think you're unmuted.
Yeah, yes. So I'm thinking with the truth, if you see a bunch of people holding on to different part of the elephant, they are all seeing the truth in their own way, but they are all true, but the big truth is the big elephant. But we usually, if we can hold on to only one part of the truth, so that helpful for me.
Yeah, thank you. That's a powerful story. And for those people who don't know it, it's a bunch of people with blindfolds, and one person has the ear, and another person has the tail, and another person is part of the leg, and they all think it's something completely different. And it's not until they talk to each other and take off the blindfold that they realize, you know, it's an elephant. You know, they only had a tiny piece of the full picture. There was a second, we're going to go back to the same slide again. And Rabbi Glass had a second. So could someone read the second bullet, please?
Moses applies truth, whole picture awareness, when he reports to Jethro. He does not whitewash the history. He mentions the hardships, Exodus 18:8, before sharing the story of deliverance. Rabbi Carol Glass.
Great, thank you. Okay, so once again, I'm going to share. So this is from the Torah, and it's when Moses is reunited with his father-in-law, and his father-in-law says, "What? So what have you been up to since you went back to Egypt?" And Moses tells him. And so what is Carol Glass's sort of observation about how Moses portrays the truth?
So does he get to the punchline late in the story? Is that he just leads up to it? He gives all the parts, and then you may not be able to figure out what the final, the punchline is, but you get clues to it or how it came about.
Yeah, absolutely. So he doesn't sort of, he gives a bigger picture with a lot of the leading up events. Great, what else? And you can also look back at the prior bullet in the chat, which is related to this a little bit as well. I was reminded of the point that Toby made earlier. Does he just kind of tell the good stuff and the triumphs?
No.
Yeah, Carrie.
I just looked at the other one. He's being inclusive. He's talking about everything that came to the deliverance story, and so the person he's talked, well, whoever it was,
His father-in-law.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that Jethro does not have to imagine anything, that all the details are being presented. And then Jethro is able to understand the punchline without, or, you know, I'm using the term, I'm sorry. Without having to ask questions possibly.
Hmm. Yes, and Paul.
So I think another that complementary to what Carrie just said, that in giving the whole story, it's making sure that, you know, I think sometimes, I know for me, it's tempting when I'm telling a story to just give all the positive highlights of what happened and not really delve too much in the uncertainties or the missteps that I made along the way, or, you know, other things that might have happened that are part of the truth as well, but don't portray me in such a great light.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the whole Facebook thing. Everyone will have the picture of the beautifully set table and, you know, whatever, but somehow they don't include the picture of the cat's poop on the carpet that was there 10 minutes earlier that they had to clean up right as the guests were arriving. That didn't that doesn't make it in the Facebook post, but I kind of get the impression that Moses kind of gave the, you know, what you call the full picture awareness. You know, he didn't just talk about, yeah, and then I hit him with this plague, and then I did that, you know, and it was, you know, that's not how Moses rolls. You know, he was a man of, you know, humility. He gave the full, tried to give the full picture. All right, so if we go a little bit deeper here, the question that, another question which I find fascinating is why, which has changed gears a little bit, you know, why is it that people are untruthful? And I think this is from Duties of the Heart, on the medieval Mussar book. But could someone read these 3 bullets? Maybe someone who hasn't read yet or someone we haven't heard from yet.
Pursuit of
Yeah.
permissible pleasures,
Mhm.
pursuit of forbidden pleasures, fear of consequences.
Great. So let's just pause there. And so someone at work says, how are things going with the such and such account? And you say, great. Even though you're getting yelled at by the customer, they're in danger of not renewing, but you tell your boss that things are just fine. For example, why might someone do this? Or why might we do this? And so there are sort of 3 possible reasons. And pursuit of permissible pleasures, pursuit of forbidden pleasures, and fear of consequences. So what are they talking about? What's a permissible versus a non-permissible pleasure, first of all? Say your spouse tells you, or somebody says, you know, Greg, you need to lose some weight. And I go out and I get an ice cream. I am permitted, there's nothing wrong with getting an ice cream, except I don't want to hear it. That I should be watching what I eat. So I lie. I say, oh, yeah, I just went out for a walk. You know, I drove to Walgreens and picked up my prescription or whatever, you know. So forbidden pleasure, that might be having an affair, you know. That's not something you're supposed to be doing. So someone would lie to cover that up. And then the fear of consequences, I think of that as kind of the example of the, you know, the person who doesn't want to tell their boss that things are not going well because they're afraid they're going to get in trouble. You know, they're not like having a good time. They're not trying to cover up like I was out playing golf, I'm working my butt off, but things are not going well. I don't want to be judged. I don't want to be fired. Janos.
Well, for me, I see that big part of our life is that we want to feel that we belong. And then if we do something that is not compliant with how other people, what they expect from us, and then, so we will do anything to hide behind what we've done, so we will not be judged and not being rejected or abandoned. So I think so that could be some of the reasons we are buying.
Yeah, thank you. Carrie.
Along with that, we are trying to protect ourselves,
Mhm. Yeah,
but it's a protection, it's a defense.
yeah. Linda.
Frank and I have some friends who always say things are good. Things are good. And I don't want to be a spoil sport or a grouchy person, but I notice that it has an effect on me that I'm not proud of, and I don't say anything about it, but I always wonder, when people ask me how I am, sometimes I'll say, good enough, or right now I'm okay. But I'm asking myself how a person should respond, how I want to respond. I don't want to say things are wonderful when they're not, but I don't want to say more than I should say.
Thank you, Linda. Anyone have any reaction to that? Or yeah, Joanne.
Yeah, it just reminds me of like all the times like you'll say to somebody, how are you? And they'll say, how are you? It's like they don't answer your question, really. And you don't really, but maybe they don't want to get into what might be bothering them or whatever, It's sort of a useless conversation, I find.
Thank you, Joanne. Frank.
This reminds me a little bit about learning about us as humans, that what do we do when we encounter somebody? How do we feel? Are we afraid? Should we be afraid? And I understand that language may have come out of that. So the fact that still remains, when two human beings encounter each other, there's a presence that is powerful. And the question is, how do we deal with it? And our culture has informed us how we will or not. And having a cheery disposition is often the fallback situation. So I think it has to do with being human, and then how we interpret our own way of being in the world. Because we have to deal with those encounters. And some of them are, by nature for us individually, is difficult. Other times, maybe it's time to shine.
Yeah, there's so much to think about there, Frank. I mean, Obi, what are your thoughts?
I think Frank made a really good point. There's that conversation, that those things that we say out of social convention, like how are you doing today, or how are you? Oh, it's been a long time, I haven't seen you. How have you been? And there, by social convention, there are only certain things that are acceptable to say. If you start listing, oh, gee, my shoulder is sore, and my kid, just got popped by the cops for drugs. And I mean, I don't know that that's not part of the social convention. you know, if we generally start down that road, people might hesitate to ask us how we're doing. I don't know. I think the social convention is that that's an introduction. How are you? I'm fine. How are you? You know, and I could be wrong. I would love to hear somebody else's take on that.
Yeah, Paul.
Yeah, I've had the experience over the last couple of weeks of hearing unpleasant news from other folks, from friends. And one of them lost her mother, who's a few years older than I am, very suddenly, just out of the blue. And then I have some other people that I used to work with who were just laid off, you know, on Monday or Tuesday. And so I find it's certainly challenging to be on the receiving end of that in terms of knowing how to make space for, you know, the good, bad, the ugly, I suppose. That, you know, I don't want to just be the Pollyanna, oh, I'm sure you'll just bounce back. You'll find a job in no time at all. Because it wasn't that long ago when I got laid off, and I know, yeah, you don't want to hear that at first. I mean, sure, yeah, on some level, yes, you know that, but the emotions are there. So interesting. But it's been fun to find ways of responding in a way that makes room for, yeah, makes room for them to share whatever they need to share.
Yeah. And that's the kind of true encounter that I think Frank was sort of alluding to. Like, if we really are encountering somebody and we really are ready to kind of share what they're going through, I think, you know, the flip side is what Toby was saying, which is most of the time it's just convention. It's just a greeting convention. I agree with that. And I was thinking of that old movie, which I never saw, but I saw the commercials a gazillion times, A Few Good Men, where Jack Nicholson is saying, you want the truth, you can't handle the truth. I mean, most people, when they're saying, how are you? They're almost, you know, it's like they're saying, I need you to be good. You know, that's what I need from you, is for you to be okay. And that's really different than approaching someone from that place of, I'm going to give you whatever space you need to be however you are, and the amount of time that it will take us to have that kind of encounter. And I'm not up for that with every person I greet, you know, so it's really, it's a dance. It's not easy to kind of get there. Yeah. Yeah, Linda.
Building on what I said before about the friends who always say everything is fine, we're really good. I was thinking about the opposite end of the spectrum, and friends who will tell you more than you bargained for. And you want to be sympathetic and offer them friendship, but it's a balance. It's really a balance.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm also, this is making me think of the Jewish teaching, or how we're supposed to act when we go to a shiva, when we go to the house of mourning. You know, what are we supposed to say to the mourner? And the answer is, we're not supposed to say anything. We're supposed to sit next to them and let them initiate the conversation. Because going into a house of mourning, well, how are you? How am I? My mother died yesterday. I'm terrible. You know, I feel so awful I can't speak. So it's a social convention put in place to avoid that other social convention. You know, sort of recognizing, and I find those like little tricks and conventions really helpful, because sometimes we don't know what to say because the truth is so painful, for all of us. That, yeah, Sarah.
I keep thinking about, for me, it depends on who you're talking to, who you're interacting with. If it's people that you're close to and you're at a lunch with a friend,
Mhm.
And you want to disclose more, or they want to disclose more, I think there's a lot of value in listening and being there. We kind of talked about that, just sort of showing up. But I think that on the flip side of that is what Linda was saying, is you don't have to tell them everything, because there's that extreme, there's those of us that are very open, but I don't need to tell them everything. So
Yeah.
it's that balance again, and so like an acquaintance in the grocery store, you wouldn't want to be, opening up about deep personal matters. But if you're, somebody that you have a relationship with, or it's a time and place, then it's different, it's a different kind of interaction.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you're implying, Sarah, is that not only do we get to choose, but the implication is, we can be sort of mindful about how we choose too. We can put a little thought into it and decide, because disclosing even to a friend, it can be painful. It could be a place of vulnerability.
No, I've really had to work on that, because I have gone through something very, very painful in the last few years. And it's not always okay for me after there's that thing, you disclose. I remember when I used to go to a lot of 12-step meetings, and you might share at group level, and then you'd leave and you'd go, oh my God, why did I share that at group level? It's like, you don't need to overshare. And, it depends a lot on the audience.
Yeah.
But also, I think that, we have to, just also protect ourselves and know ourselves, how much is enough. And it's good to be vulnerable and open, but it's also good to not spill your guts completely,
Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. Janos.
To add to what Sarah said, that for me, there's a lot of wisdom goes, if you can share the truth with a friend and it's a negative truth, they will help you, they will hear you and be with you. But then actually it's even more important if you share with the good news and they are happy for you, then suddenly you have a real friend. Because often people will not be ready to share your good news. They will compete with you or meet you in another way. So sharing the truth, being a good or bad, depend on which kind of reply you get, will tell you, are you with the real friends or.
Yeah, thank you, Janos. And all of this is making me think again back to these readings where, the whole truth is never, it's never going to be complete. I could talk for an hour and it's still going to be scratching the surface. Even when I'm way oversharing, it's still not everything. But sort of knowing like that right place, the right level for the situation for us, for how much we're going to share and how it isn't. Yeah, Paul.
I was just had the idea / awareness pop in my head that this is what, maybe the third or fourth time we've talked about this particular soul trait in this group.
Yeah.
And time that we've talked about it, we go deeper into its implications. And this is really a fascinating, not at all a surface, where are we on the spectrum, is really much more. And I really appreciate the material you've been presenting, Greg, because it really presents the whole thing about truthfulness in a much more nuanced way. And it's I don't know, I've been very anyway, it's great to have this group together. We spent so much time together, we're able to do that. I was also thinking about when I was with Nancy and with Steph over Christmas, when I went and visited when I was out in LA, or whenever it was, I can't remember. But you know, we were able to have a very deep conversation about a lot of different things because of the foundation we built in this group. And I think we've been building that foundation, and I really appreciate what everybody shares here. And I feel like I hope that I find the right balance on the whole in terms of what I do share. But I'm really happy to hold whatever people do share here. So thanks.
Thank you, Paul. I don't know whether it's Frank or Linda.
Yeah, it's me. I want to share a little bit more on the personal level. And I may have shared this. Part of it is for the last 20 years, I've been seeing a spiritual director, and I pretty much see him every month. Very interesting. He's a Methodist minister, me being Jewish, and it's been a good relationship. And one of the things I've been sharing with him I would say last year at least, I started the men's group almost 50 years ago. And I was telling him today that, because I saw him this morning in my men's group last night.
Mm-hmm.
And this discussion is really important because it seems with my spiritual director, I can share more honestly and openly. And I can share it in my men's group because we've known each other for a long time. But certain things is hard. And so I was telling him that, you know, when we were young, we were vibrant and looking forward to life. And now some of us have died, and some of us are infirm, and some of us are going into assisted living. And some of us are falling and can't keep our balance. Some of us can't find our way home when we drove to someplace. These things are happening. And the question is, what kind of conversations do we have? Because each conversation that is possible to draw somebody closer and you to them, and shorten the distance, the alienation, the fear. So just wanted to share that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Frank. Listening with an open heart. Yes, Linda.
Just to add a little levity, there's a character in Winnie the Pooh's books called Eeyore.
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody know him? So Eeyore is a rather morose fellow who everybody loves, but the glass is always half empty and it looks like it's going to rain. And I can do that, but it's more fun to be Winnie or Tigger. I live with a Tigger, so I have a good role model for watching someone bounce.
Well, you've probably figured out by now that we won't be going into our breakout groups today. We've been having a very nice, at least as I've experienced it, a connecting conversation today. Anyone who we haven't heard from, would you care to add anything? No pressure to. Yeah, Harry.
Yeah, sometimes when people ask me, how are you? My response is, how much time do you have?
Yeah.
which I think is an interesting response because I want to be truthful. But, I'm sure we have other things to discuss.
Yeah.
But then I would say I'm doing good. Thanks for asking.
Mhm.
And the other interesting thing I thought about this discussion and finding truth is this famous E.J. Carroll trial that's going on with our ex-president about whether she was raped or not, and how they are building the case and how these little truths, because it's a he said, she said discussion, but it's going to be pretty evident what the truth is going to be. But I think that's a classical discussion about what we're discussing, and obviously it's all to get the jurors to really come up with the truth, the right call. And I guess that's what all this is about, is finding the truth. And
The legal arena is a whole other aspect.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you, Harry.
Yeah.
See, we have Joanne.
Yeah, so I just wanted to add, I did recently, there's a woman and her husband who kind of disappeared from the synagogue. Something happened with the board, this whole thing. But I didn't really know the whole story. And so I texted her, and this is after many months, so, mea culpa, but, I said, "You're missed, are you going to come back?" And she asked me how I was in response. And then, so, I don't know, a few days later, I asked her again, what happened? We miss you. And she said, well, why don't you call me? Because, what's your understanding? And I wrote what my understanding. Well, that's not it exactly. So we had a kind of deep conversation, and she was very hurt by certain things that happened, and including with someone who she thought was her friend, but was also the president of the synagogue, and who was acting weird, and the rabbi did something weird. So now she doesn't feel like coming back because she feels disrespected. Anyway, but I learned the truth from her, it was not what I thought.
Mhm.
And I had the wrong idea because I didn't know.
Yeah. Well, approaching people with curiosity from a place of questioning is a great way to understand their perspective and their truth and what they experienced. So if you talk to someone and say, this is what I experienced, that's the truth because that's what they experienced. Now you may talk to someone else who was there and experienced it really differently. And that's their truth. But if someone is sharing their truth with us or their experience, it's not necessarily our job to kind of question what their experience was, question where it went to them. I mean, there's nuance and there's a lot, but at a kind of a basic human to human level, it's just, can we share our experiences with one another? Well, friends, very deep conversation today, and in a moment we will close, but I forgot to, well, actually didn't notice, but after I sent out the email today, I realized I have a doctor's appointment next week, so we will not be meeting, but we will pick up again in 2 weeks. So for now, let's once again close our eyes. Taking a deep, leisurely breath. And a nice, leisurely exhale. We'll just take a few moments to just be with what is. In this moment, hearing what we're hearing, feeling what we're feeling. Smelling what we're smelling. When you're ready, you may open your eyes.